Welcome. I'm Paul Hemsworth from the Animal Welfare Science Centre at the University of Melbourne. It is a pleasure to give this presentation on a topic that has fascinated me for most of my research career, the topic of the human-animal relationship and its implications on animals that society uses. This research has been a long-term collaborative and multidisciplinary program with people such as Professor Graham Coleman, a psychologist, the late John Barnett, a stress physiologist, and numerous Australian and overseas researchers, as well as research assistants and graduate students. Although most of our human-animal relationship research has focused on farm animals, we've also studied zoo and companion animals. Our research initially focused on animal stress and its consequences on animal welfare, and in agriculture, animal productivity, obviously. However, in the last few decades, this human-animal relationship research has increasingly examined positive welfare states in animals, since it has become widely accepted that good welfare requires positive emotional experiences, in addition to the alleviation of negative emotional experiences. In this presentation, I'll utilise the pig as an example of the effects of positive human contact on animals. In this presentation, I'll consider firstly what is a positive human-animal relationship from the perspective of the animal. I'll also consider what is positive human contact from the perspective of the animal, and I'll also consider environmental enrichment. I'll then provide some evidence that positive human contact may provide a source of enrichment for animals that confers stress resilience in challenging situations. This slide illustrates how we can think about an animal's emotional dimensions that affect its response to humans. For example, negative or unpleasant emotions arise as a consequence of punishing events associated with humans. In addition to immediate effects, for example, negative emotional experiences at the time of the punishing event, with consistent punishing events, the animal learns through conditioning to associate humans with punishing outcomes. This results in the animal having a negative perception of humans, in other words, a negative relationship with humans. In contrast, rewarding events, which lead to positive emotional experiences, can result in animals positively perceiving humans. So the history and strength of these punishing and rewarding relative strengths determine an animal's relationship to humans, from negative through to neutral to positive. Therefore, through learning, the behavioural responses of animals to humans may be regulated by the nature of the experiences occurring around the time of interactions with humans. In situations where there is a majority of positive experiences with humans, the animal will have a positive perception of humans. There are also potential modulating effects on the animal's perception of humans, such as genetics and species differences, previous experience, age and social context. Interactions between animals and humans can occur through a number of sensory channels. Animals may utilise tactile, visual, auditory, and olfactory stimuli when interacting with humans. In many species, brief opportunities to positively interact with humans over days or several weeks are sufficient to reduce the animal's fear of humans and encourage approach and interaction. Thus, a positive human-animal relationship from the perspective of the animal can develop rapidly. There are several regulatory mechanisms that provide practical opportunities for animals to develop a positive perception of humans. The first one is habituation, in which there is a waning of the animal's fear response to humans through repeated exposure. It should be recognised that passive human presence may be required to initially habituate the animal to humans. The second mechanism is classical conditioning, in which the nature of human contact provides rewarding experiences for the animal. By nature of human contact, I mean how the animal perceives the contact with humans. The third mechanism is social learning, in which individuals learn from observation of the responses of others to humans. The fourth one is generalisation, in which positive responses towards familiar humans are extended to other humans. And the fifth regulatory mechanism is sensitive periods. Sensitive periods in development in which social attachments are facilitated. And here we're talking about social attachments to humans. Social attachment may also be facilitated after a socially stressful period, such as weaning. Let's consider utilising human contact to reduce fear of humans. Low intensity visual, auditory and tactile human contact is effective in habituating farm animals to humans. So wherever possible, utilise low intensity behaviours. For example, move slowly and avoid sudden movement near animals. Alert animals to your approach or presence, as they may not be able to see or hear you. Adopt stationary and squat postures whenever possible. Talk quietly and use a soft voice, and allow animals to approach and investigate. So passive rather than active human interaction is more effective in stimulating approach and investigation by animals. Obviously, we should minimise high intensity human contact. So for example, avoid fast and unexpected movement, shouting and other loud noises, moderate to forceful tactile interactions such as slaps and hits. However, negative interactions need to be judiciously used when moving animals. In considering human contact that provides rewarding experiences for animals, we need to ensure that we minimise high intensity human interaction. We should encourage and allow animals to approach and interact. We should use gentle contact. For example, pats, strokes and touching. For many species, allo-grooming occurs between specific individuals. And so, for example, with pigs and cattle, patting and stroking probably simulates allo-grooming. We should also talk in a quiet, soft voice. It should be recognised that some animals may not need tactile contact to develop a positive relationship with humans, and that visual contact may be sufficient. For example, poultry. In addition to understanding what constitutes positive contact for many of our domesticated species, from a practical perspective, further research is needed to determine the minimum dose of human contact required to form a positive human-animal relationship in terms of the type of interaction, the frequency of interaction, the timing of the interaction, and the duration of the interaction. A number of authors, as early as the 1980s, have proposed that positive human contact may provide a source of enrichment for animals, and there's increasing evidence of this. I'd like to briefly consider some evidence with pigs that indicates that positive human contact may provide a source of enrichment that firstly enhances animal welfare at the time, and secondly appears to promote stress resilience in the long term. Now, there's probably been more research conducted on pigs, but there's also research that supports the pig research that's been done on other species, for example cattle, particularly dairy cattle, dogs, horses, and some zoo animal species. Before we consider the implications of positive human contact as a form of enrichment, we probably should think about what we mean by environmental enrichment. And this definition here by Malfi probably encompasses most of the views in the literature on enrichment. Enrichment is a broad concept which encapsulates any change in an animal's environment that leads to positive ramifications and thus improved or enhanced welfare. I would perhaps expand a little bit on that, or be a little bit more specific, and suggest that effective environmental enrichment assists animals in adapting to barren environments, mitigates deleterious stress effects, and promotes stress adaptability. Now look at some of the evidence that indicates that positive human contact may be enriching for animals. And as I said, we'll use the pig as an example of this. Now, the first experiment presented here is an old experiment by our group, but a very relevant one because it demonstrated the influence of positive human contact on stress resilience. In this experiment, pregnant pigs were housed on tethers in stalls. John Barnett, one of the authors in this experiment, had previously demonstrated that tether housing results in a chronic stress response based on a sustained elevation in blood cortisol concentrations in pigs. In addition to chronic stress, he also demonstrated immunosuppression in the tethered pigs. Thus, in this experiment, we utilised tether housing to provide a challenge to the pigs, and we examined 3 human contact treatments on these tethered pigs: positive human contact, negative human contact, and minimal human contact. Positive human contact involved contact designed to encourage approach to and interaction with the human. The human squatted in front of the stall, talked to the pig, and extended the hand. And if the pig approached, it was stroked on the neck and back. Negative human contact involved negative interactions designed to discourage approach by the pig. Minimal human contact involved routine contact associated with managing pigs in stalls. Now, blood was sampled after 3 weeks in treatment. So over 1 day, frequent blood samples were taken from indwelling catheters. As you can see from the results in this table, basal cortisol concentrations were high in the negative human contact and the minimal human contact treatments, indicating increased stress in these pigs. There was also evidence of immunosuppression in the negatively handled and the minimal contact pigs. Thus, positive human contact may provide a source of enrichment that confers stress resilience for animals in challenging situations. I'd like to present the results of 3 recent studies conducted by one of our PhD students, Megan Hayes. The first study here involves gestating sows housed in a group. We had 2 treatments, a positive handling treatment and a control treatment or a routine management treatment. The positive handling treatment involved 2 minutes of daily positive contact, and this involved the human entering the pen, moving quietly around the pen and squatting at times to encourage approach and interaction. And on approach, pigs would be handled positively, for example, patting, stroking and talking to them. And I've presented 2 sets of observations here. One, the response of sows to pregnancy check, and secondly, response of the sows to a vaccination. Now, these are 2 routine husbandry practices conducted by stock people. The pregnancy check involved an ultrasound probe, an external ultrasound probe, where the stock person would enter their pen and test each sow in the pen with this ultrasound probe. This occurred at 6 weeks of gestation. The other treatment was an intramuscular vaccination in the pen, and this was conducted at 12 weeks of age. And we looked at basically the withdrawal response of the sows to the stock person imposing these 2 husbandry practices. And you can see there from the data that sows in the control treatment showed a greater withdrawal to the stock person as the stock person approached, and showed a greater withdrawal as the stock person imposed the test. Also, for the pregnancy check, you can see that the number of interactions with the stock person, particularly following the pregnancy check, or the pregnancy check I should say, was markedly reduced. So good evidence that that positive handling has resulted in a reduction in the fear responses of these animals to routine husbandry practices. The second experiment in the 3 recent experiments that I want to describe involved young piglets. There were 2 handling treatments, a positive human contact treatment, which involved 3 minutes of positive contact 5 times per week from the first day of life until weaning at 4 weeks of age. The positive handling involved patting, stroking and scratching the piglets whenever they approached. The control treatment was just the routine management of young piglets that occurs in commercial settings. I presented some behavioural data here on the responses of pigs, or piglets in the situation, to husbandry practices, routine husbandry practices at 3 days of age. These practices were an iron injection, an oral vaccination and tail docking. And we assessed the behavioural response of the piglets to these 3 procedures by using a escape behavioural score that reflected the intensity of the escape response. And a high score indicates a more intense escape response. And you can see for the 2 first husbandry practices, piglets in the control treatment showed a more intense escape response. There was no difference in the behavioural response of piglets to tail docking. The duration of vocalisations throughout the 3 procedures was also recorded, and there was a greater duration of vocalisation in the control piglets. Furthermore, and I haven't presented data on this, but furthermore, the positive human contact piglets showed less fear of humans based on latency to approach and interact with a stationary, unfamiliar human in a standard test at 3 weeks of age. Interestingly, these positive contact pigs also had fewer injuries after weaning. So these data indicate that early positive contact improves the resilience of piglets to stressors such as husbandry procedures. The third experiment that I'll describe is similar to the previous experiment. 2 treatments were involved, a positive human contact treatment and a control treatment. So in the positive human contact treatment, piglets were handled daily for 5 minutes from birth until weaning at 4 weeks of age. The control treatment involved routine management of piglets as occurs in commercial settings. I've presented data on the response, the behavioural response of pigs to vaccination at 3 weeks of age. And you can see there that the control piglets had a higher escape behavioural score than those in the positive human contact treatment, indicating that the control piglets showed a greater or more intense escape response. We looked at cortisol concentrations after weaning. The cortisol concentrations were measured at 2 days after weaning, and you can see in the table there that the piglets in the control treatment had higher cortisol concentrations than those in the positive human contact treatment, indicating that the control piglets had a greater stress response to weaning. We also looked at the response, the cortisol response to isolation at 7 weeks. The isolation involved 2 minutes of isolation, and we looked at the cortisol concentration post-isolation. And again, the piglets, or the pigs from the control treatment, showed a greater cortisol response to isolation than those in the positive human contact treatment, again indicating a greater stress response in the control pigs. We also looked at the behavioural responses of piglets to humans at various ages, and we found that positive human contact from birth to 4 weeks of age reduced fear of humans at 3 weeks of age, but it also reduced fear of humans later in life at 6, 9 and 14 weeks of age compared to the control pigs. Positive human contact pigs also had fewer injuries after weaning and at 17 weeks of age. So therefore, this experiment indicates again that early positive human contact improves the resilience of pigs to stressors such as husbandry procedures, and in this case weaning and also isolation. Furthermore, there is evidence that this early positive handling may affect stress resilience later in life. In conclusion, there is evidence accumulating on the potential animal welfare benefits of positive human contact. I have presented a few studies by our group, but there are a number of excellent European and Canadian studies, particularly on farm animals, that demonstrate the benefit of positive human contact. However, further research is clearly required on animals that society uses. Furthermore, research is needed to determine the minimal dose of positive human contact that is rewarding and thus enhances animal welfare. For example, we need to understand the type, frequency, timing and duration of positive human contact that is effective. Here are some reviews that allow you to explore in more detail this topic if you are interested. Before I finish, this is a useful quote. As an enrichment strategy, positive interactions with humans present several advantages, as they usually occur daily and can be combined with routine checks, can be manipulated for their predictability to minimise habituation, and do not require additional resources. Thank you.